Hey, welcome back, everybody. It is the Monday, November 15th edition of Lunch with Lincoln. I am your host for today, Reed Galen, co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Joining me today is our communications director here at LP, Ryan Wiggins. Ryan, thanks for joining me.
Anytime, happy to be here.
So, guys, it is 11:59 in the East and 8:59 in the West. And so, Ryan, there's a lot going on today. Sometimes American politics feels overwhelming. Sometimes it feels like a slog. And then sometimes you get a day like today where you have like the singularity of so many different things happening. So I'm going to call it the four B's plus one. We have B backstage here helping us make all this stuff work. But let's start with our first B of the day, and that is the incomparable, and I use that word very ironically, Steve Bannon, who was indicted on 2 counts of contempt of Congress. The Justice Department, Attorney General Merrick Garland, actually followed through on their indictment. He turned himself in today at FBI headquarters. Fascinating. I was talking to Rick earlier today, and I said, I'm surprised that he didn't make the marshals come get him. And Rick reminded me that there's a lot of these folks who are, sort of keyboard cowboys, cable news cowboys, but when the real possibility of spending time inside a federal facility, a federal corrections facility, dawns on them, most of them want to get out on bail as quick as they can.
I was just relieved that he showered and shaved. I thought that was a nice thing for his perp walk today.
We should not believe that happened.
It's true. It's
true. Personal
it's
hygiene and Steve Bannon rarely
do not go together. But yeah, Reed, it is nice to see the Dems showing some teeth. There is no way that this gets done. There's no way that America considers this real if Congress doesn't consider it real. And I think that indicting Steve Bannon and showing all of Trump's sycophants that the federal government isn't going to play with this, that we are going to take it seriously, and we're going to really look into what happened and hold those accountable who were responsible. I think it's an important message to send. And I mean, personally, for me, it was like an early Thanksgiving gift to watch the man get perp walked. I've hated that guy for years. I think he's a poisonous toxin to every single American who has to listen to him or chooses to listen to him. So this was a good day.
Well, it is a good day, and as you noted, first time in American history that one branch of the federal government has, instigated an attack on another. These are things that we don't expect that would ever happen in the United States. It's hard to believe that we're less than 2 months away from the 1-year anniversary of January 6th, and so we'll see. I hope that Bannon is the first, but not the last of these people who are either indicted when they deny a subpoena, or show up because they, as I said earlier, they don't want to spend any time behind bars in a federal jail in contempt of Congress. And I think that it'll be interesting to see how this plays out now. Which is, to your point, Ryan, I think that Bannon, Miller, Mark Meadows, a lot of these people probably didn't believe that the Biden administration would call their bluff. That they thought that, this will be one more chance where we can show how feckless and weak they are. But I think that, and my guess is that Garland made this decision on his own. In normal times, we call those pre-Trump times, right? The Justice Department, although a part of the executive branch, is the most independent department of the White House because it is charged with upholding the rule of law. And so I think that Garland, probably felt an enormous amount of pressure from the media, from his allies to do this. But at the end of the day, you cannot, the Article 2 branch, the executive, has to uphold, the rights and the responsibilities of Congress. And I'm glad to see that they did. And so now we'll see where this goes from here. As we know, and Ryan, the Republicans very much want January 6th in the rearview mirror. They do not want a lot of these people talking. They do not want the likes of, the fundraisers and the Bill Steppians of the world, right? The people who are just political hacks and flacks and fundraisers up there, because this can be, as you know, very, very expensive in a very, very short amount of time. Nobody wants to lie to Congress because we know that that's also a felony. That also comes with jail time most of the times. Hello, Colonel Oliver North and others. So what do you see as the next step politically for Democrats on Capitol Hill or in Washington to ensure that the American people see that this is being taken seriously?
I think it needs to be out there. You know, the very first, they've done them, in fairness, they have been doing a lot behind the scenes. They started, you know, they had their first public hearing, I think, you know, right before they went on recess for August. And they've been doing a lot behind the scenes and a lot of interviews and that sort of thing, gathering information. I really think this needs to be on full display. I really think that this is something that every American needs to be paying attention to, because if it happened once, it can happen again. And, you know, we talk about it all the time, Reed, that, you know, this was a trial run. And if they are not held accountable and publicly accountable, and if we are not, you know, out there, you know, coming out against the lies that Fox News is telling and the brainwashing that they are doing to that base, we will see this happen. And the next time it will be successful. So, I mean, I think that what we really need is this to be taken seriously, this to be out there seriously, and this to be out in front of the American people. All of it should be televised. Every bit of it should be out there.
Well, and Bannon in particular, as you know, is sort of he's this weird Rasputin character, right? He, you know, he emanated from the Breitbart primordial ooze. And now, you know, he goes and he says, you know, he's a Leninist, as we've talked about on this show before, not John Lennon, but Vladimir Lenin wants to, quote unquote, burn down the administrative state, wants these shock troops, you know, placed in the federal government. I mean, he wants the whole damn thing torn down. And now you see, you know, he's out there saying these things. He's got the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene out there. You know, he's got, you know, he's had General Michael Flynn, you know, on his shows before. Flynn, who was saying, you know, very much the same things. You know, he's a QAnon adherent now, talking about how you shouldn't give money or support Republicans. And so, Ryan, what it feels like to me, we've seen Roger Stone now saying, you know, he's going to take on, you know, Ron DeSantis down in your home state of Florida because, you know, DeSantis isn't being Trumpy enough. And so there's a couple of things. One is that, you know, we always like to see these people eat each other. But two, it seems like that there's really just, I mean, we've always known they're nihilists. There is no true belief system. But now it feels like they're adding anarchy to the mix.
Yeah, because in every time you ever see an authoritarian regime take place in any country, they govern by fear. I mean, that is how you can get people fired up. Fear is a very, 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 very strong emotion. And I think that, you know, that's the path. I mean, I hate to say it because it is such a cliche, but I mean, we are kind of seeing it here right now. It's like, you know, in Nazi Germany, they did the same thing. In Nazi Germany, they governed by fear. It was a fear of, you know, that things were going the way of the Jews and that it was going to, you know, affect Christianity in that country, and it was affecting the economy in that country. And they get governed in a way that it was, or they put out propaganda that all was to incite fear so that people would react to that fear. And we're seeing that right now. We're seeing that in this country. I mean, I read an article this weekend. It was in the New York Times about how the Republican Party is now moving toward fear tactics and violence and encouraging violence to get their platforms through. And their only platform right now is Donald Trump. So, I mean, it is a very, very scary time in this country. And it's very important that we pay attention to what's going on, because these tactics have been used for millennia to get people in line and to scare people into submission.
Well, I mean, that's that one. I saw that article and I've seen some of the other follow-up pieces of it. And the truth was, I thought, well, thank you for showing up 5 years late. I mean,
correct.
If you go back to 2015 and 2016 and throughout, you know, Donald Trump's presidency, he invoked violence. You know, he told people at his rallies to beat up protesters, that he would pay their legal bills. When he spoke to the Fraternal Order of Police, he said, you know, don't mind hitting their heads on the car door, on the, you know, when you're putting them in the back. You know, when George Floyd was killed, or was murdered, I should say, the summer of 20, and there were demonstrations all over the country. You know, he invoked the words of Bull Connor and other, you know, very ugly, you know, racist police and authorities. You know, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. We saw what he did to, you know, peaceful protesters on Pennsylvania Avenue when he wanted to make his, you know, his walk across to St. John's Church, across Lafayette Park, you know, where he had them gassed and moved out of the way. So to me, this is not a new phenomenon in the current Trump era amongst Republicans. This is one in which, to your point, there's been no sanction. We even see the Kyle Rittenhouse trial is in its closing day, maybe today, where a young man obtained an assault rifle illegally, underage. His mom drove him across state lines. He shot 3 people, in some sort of, weirdo vigilante thing. He's a hero amongst what I'm going to call like almost the anarcho right. And he's likely to walk because of this insane judge, right, who dismissed one of the charges against him, which was illegal firearm, in possession of a minor.
Yes.
So this
how
is
can you,
one
and
of those
how
things.
can that be? How can that be something that you reject? He was a minor and he had a firearm. That is illegal possession. That whole trial has been such a sad thing, I think, for the rest of the country to watch. And it's not ours that we're a democracy organization, but it's been a lot. It's been a lot, I think, for this country to see anarchy and people getting away with it. I mean, you have rights in this country, but you don't have rights from those rights. So it's like you have the right of free speech, but you don't have the right for consequence from that free speech. And right now, what the right is getting away with is consequence free speech. I mean, they say what they want to say, they do what they want to do, and there's no one holding them accountable for anything. Right. And I mean, when we're talking about the threats, Reed, I mean, the fundraising emails going out from the NRCC right now are terrifying. I mean, they are threatening their own base into writing checks. And if you don't, you're not a patriot and we're going to tell Donald Trump. Like, what is that in this country?
Well, and I mean, we've seen this too with, there was the story from last year about the men in Michigan who were trying to kidnap and murder Governor Gretchen Whitmer up there.
Yes.
We see now with school board meetings where the Proud Boys show up in their gear and their face masks because they're so proud of who they are. They cover up their faces so that they're not to be known, but they're intimidating local officials. They're intimidating school board members into not wanting to participate anymore. And that's one of those things where you ask yourself, well, if I were in their chair, right? If I were sitting at that school board meeting and my family and I were getting death threats, would I stay in my job? Would I stand up to them? Or would I retire or resign into private life and hope they leave me alone? That's a hard question, right? And if someone says, I don't want to do this anymore, as much as I think it's bad for all of us, it's hard to blame them as well, right? I mean, the idea Absolutely. That someone might be crazy enough to attack you and your children for trying to do a job, and listen, there's probably no worse job in America than being a school board member even before all this, right? No parents are ever happy about anything. But that's where we get into a position, as well as you're talking about, where history shows us too, that the types of people we need in public service are less and less likely to put themselves up for it if they believe that this is all they're ever going to get.
Yes. And until that's corrected, I mean, and I don't know the answer. I mean, freedom of speech is such an important freedom that we have. It's the reason it's the First Amendment right. I mean, it is so, so important for people to be able to express opinions and stuff. But you have to look at, my husband and I were talking about this a lot. And it's looking at the anger. I mean, I live in the belly of the beast, and people are really angry. They are really, truly murderously angry, and they're getting that anger from Fox News. It's being fed to them. It's being spoon fed to them every single day. And there's nothing that is stopping Fox News from doing that. So at some point, I mean, it's like, in this country, we have Second Amendment rights, but we also have regulations on those Second Amendment rights so that not everyone is running around shooting everybody. I think it's time to kind of look at that sometimes with the First Amendment too. Like, at what point in time, when you have propagandists out there truly dismantling this country, at what point in time do we say stop? Like, enough? You can't do this to our people.
Well, again, that's the thing, is that there's been so little in the way of consequences for any of that. But we've got 15 minutes left, the fastest 30 minutes in American politics, Ryan. So let's turn to something a little happier. So today, the second B in our 5 Bs of the day, President Joe Biden will be signing the long-awaited infrastructure bill. This will provide billions of dollars for all 50 states and all 435 congressional districts, plus Puerto Rico and our territories. This is a big deal, or a big effing deal, as Joe Biden likes to say. It's fascinating to see how many members of Congress, especially Republican members of Congress, are calling this socialism. and everything else. But, they're also saying to their supporters, when they get to their districts, this is going to be really, really good for us. I mean, I think I think Rick told us this morning that, in Matt Gaetz's district, as long as it's his district, he was crowing to some of his supporters about how much federal money would be flowing into his district, which I think you actually might live in, by the way.
I do live in his district.
And so, it's interesting to me that, this is a big, the president's had several big policy wins this year. The first was the American Recovery Act right after he took office, and now he's got an infrastructure bill. And yet, for some reason, it seems like, for we can't get out of the narrative for Democrats that the sky is falling.
I think that a lot of that is, we focus a lot at the Lincoln Project on the infighting in the Republican Party and the fact that, you have, the McConnell Republican contingency versus the Trump contingency. The Democrats are going through a similar thing right now with the progressive left. And I think that, one of my frustrations as a former Republican consultant looking at all of this is, Reed, we do messaging. And part of that right now with the Democrats needs to be the messaging of democracy. We are all one issue voters for the next 2 cycles, at least. And that one issue is democracy, because you know what? None of this other stuff, the paid parental leave, all of the social programs, the social awakenings, all of this stuff does not matter if we lose the democracy that ensures those rights. So, I mean, right now they need to be focusing and uplifting the president that they have. I know that the progressive left isn't super excited about Biden, but he's what we've got, and he's a hell of a lot better than what we could have had. So it's time to get on board, and it's time to prioritize the country and our democracy over all of these social awakening, social programs, all of it. They're all important, but we have to get to the point where we are steady and we are on, solid footing before we can start going there. And the Democrats are going to eat their own if they don't start encouraging the president that they have and supporting the president that they have. It was not an easy fight to get to this moment, as you and I both know.
No, well, I think that's right. I mean, I was on the phone last week with a supporter of ours, a very progressive guy, who said, look, I'm a Bernie Sanders progressive. I'm an Elizabeth Warren progressive. But for the time being, I'm going to put my progressive shoes in the closet, and, I'm going to lock arms with other Democrats. I'm going to lock arms with you guys, because I understand that if we don't get through this moment together, we'll get through this moment apart. And, we already see that the Trump world, the conservative media, I'm going to use intelligentsia in air quotes, conservative donor base, whether or not it's high dollar donors or small dollar donors, highly organized, really willing to take the fight anywhere and everywhere simultaneously. Something that, the Democratic Party has historically not been great at, and the country writ large hasn't been prepared for, because we've never seen democracy so in peril. But also, as you talk about messaging, talking about, democracy to the individual voter can be a pretty nebulous and big concept. And they're like, we've all lived, been lucky enough to live with what was mostly a functional democracy, even if we didn't always like what it did. And so sometimes it's hard to convince people that something that they've taken for granted because they never had to fight for it is now under threat.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that I see that a lot around here. I mean, I live in a military town, Reed, and there's a lot of support. You'd be hard pressed to find anybody in my hometown who does not consider themselves patriotic, who does not consider themselves a supporter of the military and a supporter of our country and loving our country. And I mean, like I said, I think this is the danger of Fox News and a danger of OAN, is because what they are being told to do is dismantle a country that they love, and they don't see it that way because they're not hearing anything on the other side of that. And, I think that is where we are as a country, is like, you have to explain to people, like, listen, the reason we are a country is we fought against this in England. I mean, we fought against having a king. We fought against a monarchy. We fought for our independence from that. And here we're trying to crown another king. Like, stop. There are a lot of people who have died in this country to preserve your right to do whatever the hell you want to do, for the most part.
Well, and that's the other part too, right? There's even before all this, there was very little that the average American couldn't do if they wanted to, right? The whole idea was that do what you want, but freedom is, freedom to do what you want, but with the responsibility to understand you can't do it to the effect of other, when it starts to affect other people, right? The whole idea of, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Yelling fire in a crowded theater is now Republican stock in trade. And so, we as the Lincoln Project and our friends and allies have to push back on that. And I think to your point, going back a little bit to, Democrats stepping up on Steve Bannon and the insurrection piece of this, now is the time to say, okay, let's get voting rights done. If you really, I do believe this is that the single most important thing that, the Democratic House, the Democratic Senate, and the White House could do is get voting rights done, as soon as possible. Now, it's easier said than done, obviously. But this is one of those where unless we're going to allow, states to create all their own rules, and they have been this year. Remember that the Supreme Court has gutted the Voting Rights Act of 1965. They've got to put these protections back in place because 22 is the way station to 24. And if things go sideways next year, then it's going to make 2024 a hell of a lot more dangerous because you're going to have a bunch of state legislatures, a bunch of potential new Republican governors who are like, you know what? We're just going to do what we want. We've already put these things in place. Local controls out the window, voice of the people's out the window, and we're just going to control everything because that's what we want.
Well, and if you want to see what that looks like, if you want to see what 2022 looks like, if we don't wake up and we don't fight these things, look at Florida. I mean, we have a governor right now who is at war with the number 3, I think, top public university in the country. There's accreditation is in question because he's not allowing professors to testify against a bill that he passed because he knows that when they testify against it, they're going to say, no, this bill is not constitutional. This bill is a problem. And he's banning that. And it's about to cost accreditation to the University of Florida. I mean, you are seeing, if you want to see what this will look like and want to see why this will be so scary in 2024 if we don't do something in 2022, look to my state. Every day there's a headline. Every day it terrifies me. I pulled my kids out of public schools this year because of it. I mean, that is real here. And we are seeing it writ large, and it will happen elsewhere. You're seeing it in Texas. I mean, where you have these strong Republican governors who are following in Trump's footsteps and believe that fear and intimidation is the way to get things done, you are seeing what will happen on a national scale if we don't stop it.
No, I think that's right. I think that's right. And that, really leads into, our third B of the day, which is Lauren Boebert, and, how Republicans fight culture wars. And they understand why everybody should understand they fight culture wars because they have electoral impacts, especially in a time when a country is so divided, when states are so divided, when districts are so divided. And so, B, why don't we roll this clip of Lauren Boebert that gives us an example of what we're talking about, and then Ryan and I will dissect it.
Mayor Pete was on a 2-month paternity, whatever the heck you want to call it, leave. The guy was gone. Okay. The guy was not working because why? He was trying to figure out how to chest feed. Maybe someone should tell him, please, so he can get back to work. Listen, I'm a mother of 4. I delivered one of my children in the front seat of my truck because as a mom of 4, we got things to do. Ain't nobody got time for 2.5 months of maternity leave. We have a world to save here.
Well, Ryan, I mean, Lauren Boebert is always headache inducing.
Yes.
But before we get to the piece about being a mom, which you are and I am not, this is what I'm talking about when it comes to how Republicans weaponize issues, which is they, when it came out that Secretary Pete Buttigieg, Secretary of Transportation, and his husband Chasten are now the parents of, I believe, twins. The Republican rage machine made this into an issue. But guys, the issue wasn't about parental leave. What the issue was, what they wanted their supporters to see and go crazy about, and this is when she talked about chest feeding, was a picture of 2 gay men with babies, right?
That is exactly right.
Right. They wanted to make this about how, conservatives or evangelicals don't believe in gay marriage. So they want to make gay marriage an issue. They want to make gay parents, parents, of children who happen to be gay and gay relationships, whatever it is, an issue because this is what they want to fight on, right? This is the divisive nature of it. Throw all the family values stuff, bullshit out that they've been talking about for years. 2 parents at home, 2 loving parents, a stable household, all that. But Ryan, what we saw, the reaction was from the Democrats and the left was to send Secretary Pete out there and talk about the need for paid parental leave, right? Okay, I'm fine with it, right? But the point was that they were making a cultural argument, and the Democrats responded with a policy answer.
Correct. And I mean, that's the thing that I think we need to understand about fighting the right now. They know their evangelical base was kind of grossed out by Donald Trump. And I can say that because I was raised by evangelicals. I know where they stand on this. But they have to come up with some way to bring those people back into the fold. And the best way for them to do it is to stand on their King James Bibles and to say, you know what? No, I don't believe in gay marriage. They forget the fact that God said don't judge. But they say, I don't believe in gay marriage. I don't believe in abortion. I don't believe in these things. And so they're trying to turn their voters into one issue voters. And by starting these culture wars. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you know what? I applaud Pete Buttigieg for doing this. I mean, for being a parent. Being a parent is hard, Reed. You know this. You've got kids at home too. It's hard. It's hard every single day. And you know what? Good for him for taking the time to bond with these kids. Paid parental leave, I'm a big supporter of it. But that, to your point, that is not what this is about. And until the Democrats can start calling this out for what it is and calling them on their shit, and they need to be called on their shit. Until that happens, we're going to continue to lose this because we're not fighting the war that's being fought. We're fighting a policy war. And that's not where we are right now. This isn't about policy. This is about triggering the evangelical population inside the Republican base.
Well, and also, this rage machine, this media machine that the right wing has, as we've talked about before, is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly well resourced. It never stops. It's relentless, right? And so, we like to say that, Republicans throw the sort of culture war bomb at Democrats, and as opposed to Democrats throwing it back at them, they try and explain what the culture war bomb is, and then it explodes on them. Right.
Yeah, they try to neutralize the bomb, and you can't neutralize that bomb because that's not the point. The point isn't to come up with policy. The point is to bait the Dems and to own the libs and to fire up their evangelical base. It's the only point in these culture wars.
Right. No, and that's the whole thing. And I think, as we go forward, gang, just remember that the reason why Republicans fight on this issue is because they cannot win a united country. They can only win in a divided country. That's the bottom line. This is all about ascension to and retention of power, self-aggrandizement, self-enrichment. Never underestimate the fact, guys, we talk about a lot of stuff. Guys, this is just about power. That's all it's about. They want to be in charge. They want to be able to tell you what you can and what you can't do. And they're willing to employ that third of the country who happens to agree with them in any and all ways that they can do that. All right. Our last B of the day, Ryan, is Beto O'Rourke just announced his candidacy for governor in Texas this morning, taking on Greg Abbott. Beto ran against Ted Cruz, maybe the most loathsome creature in American politics, and that is saying something in today's American politics. Lost by about 2.5 points. Ran a brief presidential campaign in 2020. Now taking on Greg Abbott, who we have a special place in our heart for. Guys, I went to high school and college in Texas. Greg Abbott has been in office literally since the last millennium. He was a Supreme Court justice. He was Attorney General. Now he's going for his third turn around the bend as governor. Beto, I think, will have plenty of money. He'll have all the institutional support from Democrats, such as it is in Texas. I think probably lots of national fundraising support. So what's your take? Just, on that culture war front, as Beto is going into this, give our folks a little bit of a sense of how we see Greg Abbott from the Lincoln Project's perspective.
Greg Abbott, how do we see him? We see him as scum. We see him as a big problem. And we see him as somebody who cannot catch steam. But I will tell you, I have been impressed with Beto O'Rourke since I watched a 60 Minutes on him in 2018, and I think everyone should go back and watch it. It's 2018. It was they focused an entire segment of their show on him, and he was very, very impressive. What he is going to have to do is the same thing that any Democrat who's running anywhere is going to have to do, especially a state that leans red, is he's going to have to not get baited by the progressive left, and he is going to have to play to the middle. He's going to have to play to and try to get some of these moderate Republicans who are sick of Greg Abbott. And so, I'm seeing it in Florida. I'm seeing some missteps by the Democratic gubernatorial candidates here where they are weighing in on stuff. I am a big believer in win first, policy after you win, but win and say the things that you need to say to win, and then worry about, the public policy things that you want to attack after the fact. He is going to have to appeal to the moderates, and that may not be the most comfortable space for a true Democrat to do, but it's where he's going to have to be.
Well, I mean, the good news he has, as we wrap up here, is that he will have a clear primary this coming March. Abbott is running against two nuts, potentially a third. If I heard a rumor that Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick may decide to jump into the gubernatorial race right before the filing deadline, December 13th of next month, which would totally scramble that race. But what we also hear is that Greg Abbott is going to call yet another special legislative session for early next year, so that he can, try and get done all the right-wing wacky things he needs to do so that he can win his primary. He has with our help, he has, and the likes of his nut opponents, Alan West, Dan Patrick, Don Huffines, has dragged himself further and further to the right. SB 8, the abortion law there, is unpopular. Even Democrats oppose the basically unlicensed carry law that says any 18-year-old can go to a Walmart and buy a gun and walk around with it in his hip. So as he does these things to try and avoid his to protect his right flank, he is pulling himself further and further away from those very voters you're talking about. And as I think you said is the right thing, which is now it's up to Beto to understand how he's got to go get those people. I think they are ripe and open territory for him. Abbott's been around a long time. People tend to like new things versus old things. And let's not forget that, if the power flickers for 15 seconds down there this winter, then Abbott's in a whole boatload of trouble. So guys, check out Beto O'Rourke. We'll have a replay of the podcast I recorded with him earlier this year. We'll be running. Until then, Ryan, I want to thank you. B, as always, thank you for your help backstage. Everybody, remember to follow us on Twitter at Project Lincoln. Sign up for us, lincolnproject.us. We're going to be out in the States. We were in Texas last week. We're traveling again this week. We'll be out on the road again for the rest of the year. Hope everybody will join us. Until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks, gang.
See y'all. Thank you.